failure. It's the right thing to do. That's what makes you a champion.
I can't wait for Daddy to go, Dad, just go to the gym! Go to the gym!
The amount of people that have either come to me or other people I know, other coaches, and gone, yeah, I want to get to the Britain, but you've never done the show. Yeah, I want to get to the Britain. Success for me is getting to the Britain this year, and I'm like, you can call I was crap, but it took me 14 years. But then again, back then you couldn't just walk you couldn't pick a qualifier where you knew it was weak or they were or people didn't pay. I never paid to compete. Apart from membership for NABA, I never paid to compete. So you can totally understand why now they qualify 10 people out of a class, because that's 10 people that are going to pay whatever it is, £400 to compete at the British. Yeah. So it is more of a money game now.
Yeah, it's definitely watered down in a sense that, I've seen some of these first timer shows that PCA have had recently, and they've been inviting the winners of those first timer shows and the top three to the British and to the Universe. And I'm like, hang on a minute now. That's like seasoned competitive sort of ballpark, and they're getting invites to those prestigious shows like off the bat.
Turn your mic down just a touch, Johnny.
Yeah, no problem.
It's
distorting right there. Audio settings.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought that was...
it is a money game, and when it first came here, and the big money maker thing was the change of the pro card from the UKBFF, which was still kind of just a membership thing. You paid like 25 quid to do the show or something, admin. And but apparently in America that's been going on since the dawn of time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so with the dilution of the pro card, in their first year of doing it, there were 125 new pro cards on top of the kind of already registered. We're talking like £250,000 just straight off the bat for membership of the pro league. And there's money to be made, so I can see why
it is definitely a money game. Like you said, I always recognized it from the West that if I didn't win the West, then there was someone else going to the Britain that just beat me. So unless it was like obviously 2015 with Tom, because we were recording the prep, that was the whole point, is going at the West and then going to the Britain. But I hadn't been beaten at the West before. So every time I went to the Britain, I'd won my class or won an overall. And I suppose it's easy for me to say, having that run, you shouldn't be at the Britain unless you won your qualifier. And I know that the qualifiers up north, or even in Wales in class 4, was, some years was really contested. You look at the Northwest, and there were guys that were getting third and fourths that in other years were going on and placing top 3 at the British, but they just didn't get through and stuff like that. So I think these days, if NABA went down the road that, I think NABA's really slipped, but if they went down the roads of the PCAs, of the FitX, of the, the Two Bros and what have you, let's face it, Two Bros, all you have to do is turn up and you qualified for the finals to get a pro card and stuff. So, I think that's really taken. I think that's taken the sort of. It was a real achievement for me to get to the British.
Yeah,
I think stand on that.
Another thing, Paul, as well. I think what the true test of who's best in your region, and then the winner gets to represent your region at the finals. I think there's something quite prestigious about that, rather than turning up at a qualifier and just hoping that the best person in Britain doesn't turn up. Do you know what I mean? And ultimately, for me, I think that's the thing that draws me to NABA more so than anything, is knowing that if I go to the NABA Wales and win that, I'm the best in the Welsh region. If I go to the British and I make the top 6, then happy days. But ultimately, I've still got that in my arsenal that I was the best in my region for that year, and it's a bit of something for me to hold in high regard.
It's
Oh, yeah.
one of those things, and just NABBA as a whole. Some people probably watching this don't even know what fucking NABBA is.
Yeah, I was going to say that,
I'm not
Dan.
joking.
Yeah.
And in recent times, I mean, I know Amph went to the Northwest. He was said it was you'd get 100 bodybuilders. You get 100, you know. And I remember like doing the West. Actually, my first show was the West at the Corn Exchange, and you were there doing the real class. And I came up first timer, and there were 35 people in first timers. You know, and these shows, these NABBA shows, were huge. And the end result was prestigious. The COVID decimated it. You know,
Oh, yeah.
Amph went to the Northwest. I went to the West Britain. There were 4 bodybuilders, 4. You know, and it's like, and now we're like, you know, we're talking about these people charging the money, like making it glitz and glamorous and stuff like that. Actually, like, they kind of need to go and reassess, you know, and come up with something, because no one would have even known that the West existed unless you actively pursued it. It's not on social media. It's not like there. It's not in the eye. It's not made to look like snazzy. I mean, you know, competing, it's not snazzy. When you actually get there, you're just in your pants, lying on a bin bag, trying not to put tan on the walls. Like, that's the show.
Yeah. I don't think Instagram would be as successful if it was back then, because no one spoke to anybody, no one certainly smiled, and there was nothing such as selfies and whatever. Yeah.
Well, welcome back to Bash Bros Podcast, episode 72. We are very fortunate to have one of the OGs of bodybuilding forum days. From when I first started bodybuilding anyway, Paul Scarborough. Unfortunately, Ryan's not attended today. It seems to be a running theme there. But it seems like we've got a lot to talk about, a lot to catch up on. So what we normally do, Paul, me and Dan know most of what we're asking you, but for those watching, describe to us, you know, your bodybuilding career, what got you into bodybuilding. And obviously a lot has happened since you've stopped bodybuilding as well. So just a whistle stop tour, really.
Okay. Cheers, Johnny and Dan, for having me on. It's the apart from my podcast with Tom, I haven't been on a podcast for a number of years, so it's nice to actually get involved again. I guess I've been competing since I was 20. I'm 52 now. I know. I don't look it, but you know. Yeah. So, and my very first contest, ticked the wrong box, ended up in the open class, and got dead last. So, you know, lessons were learned and stuff. So we've just been talking before the show. I'm a NABBA guy, or was a NABBA guy, and competed at the local shows in Plymouth and the NABBA West for many years. I had a decent run of about 10 years with no defeats at the West. Got a couple of overalls, and had some decent times at the British. Placed top 3 a couple of times, Worlds and Universe. And as I was saying to Johnny before, my goals when I started competing wasn't really to win a big title like the British or the Worlds. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't have said no, but it was more about being recognised as one of the best class 4s around. So when class 4s were being talked about, my name was mentioned at some degree, you know. And I certainly think I achieved that at the time through my competitive career. And like you just said, I had a sort of a second career on the forums. And I guess the majority of people that know me outside of competitive world know me from the forums. I started on Mick Hart's forum, and I doubt many people will remember Mick Hart, but I'm sure you've got the listeners who have aged well, who do remember Mick. I was on his forum for a couple of years before I joined UK Muscle in 2005, and I actually properly left UK Muscle January just gone. Wow. And it was more about a change in ownership that I didn't agree with, and them turning it more into a advertising money machine than what I wanted to give from forums. So UK Muscle, what I'm sure both of you remember it, at its peak was probably the best bodybuilding forum in the world, to be fair. And we've had some great members on that have gone on to do really good things, and that were just the amount of knowledge that they had just made the forum itself what it was. So I found my place in there. I loved it there because I could share information. I used to trial everything I did, back in the days of probably 2005 to 2010-ish, and before 2005, I was using like huge doses of gear, because I never liked to give advice on stuff I'd never done myself. So people are talking about 1.5 or 2 grams a week and things like that. Back then, I was knocking in 4 or 5 grams. Fair, no one really back then knew what the fuck we were doing. If the bigger guy did it, you sort of did it. There was no real access for bloods, where now you can get a McDonald's and a fucking blood test. So it's everywhere. So I did that. I sort of forted really in more the peptides and the growth section of the market. I find gear boring. That probably insults all these experts, but I find it boring because I just find that if you can't grow on testosterone, you can't grow. We all know that there's little things that make us, make the muscle harder, make you stronger and stuff like that. But I just genuinely thought, just keep it simple with gear. It gets a little bit complicated when you come into a show, but essentially, the mechanism of growth and insulin and the peptides when they first came out just interested me more. It wasn't a case of just bang it in and that was it. So that really got through. And then in 2015, me and my good friend Tom Blackman made Prep the Series, which was a 7-episode documentary of me and him swearing at people and prying into our cereal of how hard prep is.
I remember.
I got well and truly slapped down by my missus a couple of times in a couple of the episodes. But it for any of your viewers who have not seen it, it's now on YouTube free. Me and Tom have re-released it. I think episode 5 was last 2 weeks ago. Episode 6 will be tomorrow, and episode 6 is the one with Luke Sandow in. And obviously the day we're recording this, it's 2 years after Luke's death. So it's quite, and we didn't actually, make it that way, but it's quite, good that it releases tomorrow. But people should watch it. I think it surprised a lot of people. It surprised me and Tom more than anybody. I genuinely thought my missus would watch it and maybe a couple of my friends, and that was it, And I think today it's something like 10,000 people have downloaded it, and we sold a whole run of DVDs and things like that. And now by making it free, it just lets the newer generation, that just, I think, even if I say so myself, I think it was a good thing. I think we didn't hold back. I can't let my kids watch it because of the amount of swearing that Tom did, obviously not me. But yeah, that and that
it was a good insight into then, and actually it was quite front running, because we get a lot of people now like documenting all of that sort of prep. And that wasn't really happening like back then. I think James Grealish filmed it, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so he's a good friend of mine, so I was getting some of the back scene like fill-ins on it. It was just like a very like non-frilly presentation of like what to expect. So I'd say anyone who's thinking about doing a prep that likes the idea of wearing some sparkly pants on stage goes and sees actually what it's like before you think about, oh, this is cool, and then start whinging when it gets hard, because you're going to feel that. You're
Yeah.
going to have, and it looks at like the mental aspect and the strength needed and all of that stuff. And I think that some people should have a look at that, because we paint now a little bit of a different scene where it's like people talk about how much cardio they don't have to do, how they didn't have to do these things.
God, yeah.
And that's cool for 99, for 1% or whatever, but 99% of us need to fucking die. And we saw some of that.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And I think on the whole aspect of it all, in the last episode, I mentioned it when we got interviewed right at the end after I'd not placed at the finals, which I did on purpose, obviously, because of the nature of the rep was like, this is what can happen. So we agreed, and I did it on purpose. And I said, leading into a show, everybody wants to know about it. Everybody's interested, wants to know how far you're off, what you're eating, what you're doing. But then after that show, no one gives a fuck. And they really don't give a fuck, and like you just said, Dan, from a mental point of view, that's really hard to cope with. The mental strength that you need to do a proper prep. Yeah. You both know is deep, and you're normally doing that by yourself because the people around you just don't know what's needed. But I think afterwards so we did prep the series, and then I'd like to say we lived on happily ever after until this point, but then I became some sort of health specialist for the NHS. So I had kidney disease and went into dialysis in 2017. Ultimately, from the tube that they had in my chest to do the dialysis, I caught sepsis. And then really my world really fell apart. I died a total between 2017 and 2019. I was lost on the table twice, and I was literally walking through the door another 2 times. I found out afterwards that my left leg, which has got a scar from the knee to the hip, I was seconds away then checking it off because of the level of infection in there from the sepsis. It took my lungs, my right lung's knackered. I had heart failure, just a whole, plethora of delights. So I spent 10 weeks in the hospital, had 5 or 6 surgeries in a week, and all that sort of stuff. Came out, then got heart failure and went into ICU. And then once that all got sorted, had the transplant in February 2018. So I've just gone through 4 years.
The kidney transplant, not a heart transplant, just for...
Yeah, sorry, a kidney transplant. Sorry. They sorted out the heart problem. And then I think it was 3 months later, I had my sister's transplant, kidney transplant. And they tell you that it's so different. Literally, it's night and day. I hope you guys and none of your listeners ever have to go through it, and people say that, I hope you don't do it. But seriously, I don't hate anybody enough to have them go through what I went through. And I still, I had a bit of a bad time at the beginning of this year. I still go through it, I remember it was probably about, I think it was the Wednesday of the 3rd week I was in there, and that 3rd week I had 6 surgeries on my legs. And I remember on the Wednesday night, I was sat up in my bed. So my main surgery was on the Tuesday. So I had one on Saturday, none on Sunday, one on Monday, one on Tuesday, the main one on Tuesday, none on Wednesday, one on Thursday to check if the one on Tuesday had been a success, none on Friday, and I wasn't supposed to have one on Saturday. I woke up in the morning, coughed, and that gave me a hematoma in my left leg, and so I had to go down for surgery again, and I was 4 hours in there. The one on Tuesday, I was 6 hours in, came round, and then I had a hematoma, whatever it was, in my left leg. I went back in for another 7 hours. But on the Wednesday, I sat up in bed and I genuinely, not that anybody would say I wasn't genuine, but I was just staring, and I just thought the only way I'm getting out of here is in a body bag, and it wasn't a point where I was like, oh, I'm gonna do it myself or anything, because I love life, I think, and I've never ever thought that much, thought that far, but I did. I cried, and I just couldn't see an end to it, because up to that point, guys, it was literally every day. Lung collapse, right? This collapse, right? Blood clots on your heart, leg. It was just constant. And I get that people are disappointed when they have to wait a few months for a physio appointment in the NHS, but when you need it, they're all there. So that was a tough couple of years. My last surgery was in 2019, when they had to move my kidney. They put your kidney in the front to the right side of your abs, so they don't take out any kidneys. My other two are shriveled up in where everybody's are. Something went wrong, of course it did. So they had to move my new transplanted kidney over to the left and my bladder over to the right, and sewed it on top. And that was the second time where I had it on the table and they brought me back. So I've got 3/4 of a kidney now. So obviously that all happened, and then I got my transplant and things like that. And to be honest, the tough part now is the mental part. I know more people are talking about it, and I do know that because unfortunately I've had messages where people have messaged me and said, do you have to keep on going on about it? And I'm like, I'm not going on about it. People will ask me a question, and before, when I was what I consider top of my game, which was probably between 2005 and 2012, 13, yeah. This conversation wouldn't happen. I wouldn't. Yeah, I'd feel like I couldn't be like that. I couldn't feel weak and stuff. So after all this has happened to me, I've been honest with people, and I've said it on social media. I'm sure you've seen it at some point. And I actually got a message once from a guy, some dickhead, obviously, that just said, "Do you know what? I'm sick and tired of hearing it. All right, it happened." I'm like, all right, just stop following me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. Do you know what? I would expect some people to say it. So I'm not like, oh fucking hell, that really hurt. I'm just like, stop following me. That's a massive part of my life, and it changed me. And the reason why it changed me, and the reason why now I speak to patients in dialysis and transplant patients and all that sort of stuff, and I say to them, and a lot of them are bodybuilders, and I say to them, don't let bodybuilding overtake your life, because the one thing that really affected me was after my transplant. So I was on recovery, was that I was no longer P-Scarb, and people may not understand that, but you guys know me from the forums, and as far as I was concerned, I was P-Scarb, the bodybuilder, the forum guy, and the coach and everything like that. So my physique was a big part of P-Scarb, and I no longer had that physique. I was 106 kilos the day before I got sepsis. Yeah, I was still on dialysis, still training, everything like that. I was 106 kilos, reasonably lean, I'd finally got that shoulder, tricep, like bulge that we all like, traps and all that stuff. And the morning I went in for my transplant, I was 72 kilos.
Fuck. So,
I had therapy. I got diagnosed with severe PTSD, and the therapy helped loads. And the therapist said, the psychologist said, the problem you've got, Paul, is that you've forgotten who you are. You know, you don't see yourself as a dad, as a husband, as a friend. You just saw yourself as a bodybuilder.
Mm.
And now that's been taken away from you. Your job now is to build up, you know, to that. So that was a big thing for me.
Yeah,
And
I think I was thinking about this earlier, Paul. Like, perspective is everything. And for a lot of people, they wouldn't quite understand where you're coming from there. But when you've spent so much, it's like time served, isn't it? Like when you spent so much time and effort into something, you don't want to give it up. It's like sometimes when you hold on to a shit relationship, sometimes you're holding on to it just because you've put so much into it. You feel like it would be a waste to give it up. And it's like it's that unwillingness to part with or something that you've put so much time and effort, and you did have that huge credibility that came with the forum stuff. You were the go-to guy, and yeah, and I can only imagine how that feels. It's like and it was forced on you rather than it being your choice as well. You know.
the 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 one good like silver lining, because you got to find that, is I'd retired from bodybuilding.
Mm.
Yeah.
I achieved what I wanted to achieve, so it wasn't as if I was on my way up and then this happened and I didn't even achieve what I wanted to achieve. So and in a slight twist, that's probably why I felt like I did, because I had achieved all that and stuff like that. So I speak to a lot of people now, and I have a very different outlook. You know, I still train, you know, and I train as much as my, you know, the last thing that the sepsis did to me that's now lasting is it basically I got sepsis in both shoulders, and this one it stripped all the cartilage, so I have no cartilage. It's just bone on bone. And they wanted to leave it until I was about 60, to get it changed because apparently I was too young. Can't hear that enough. But I'm on so much opioid painkillers now. I'm on 200 milligrams of tramadol a day, like 40 milligrams of oxycodone, and it's just taking the tip off it.
Mm.
So I've started the thing to get it replaced. Now I know that that's gonna, you know, I'm gonna be out of it and, you know, out of my like normal routine for ages. But after being through what I've been through, I've got no doubt that I'll do that, and obviously smash myself full of BPC, um, and I'll recover and come back and whatever. Yeah. So, but I still struggle. I don't struggle as much as I used to do, and it gives me a.
So, Paul,
Sorry, go on.
sorry to jump in, but so I think a lot of people watching this now will have probably put two and two together and got five. So they would have heard the story about your high dosage of gear, and they would have heard your story about your all your issues there. Can you give us your summary on the relation to those two things? Where obviously we've discussed it, but I'll let it's better coming from you.
No, obviously, let's be fair. When I first found out I had chronic kidney disease, I made the link, you know, as so many people do. But the real truth of the matter, I've got a generic blood disorder, so I've still got that problem. So the problem I had that caused the kidney disease, I've still got that. Now, obviously, the way I live my life means that my transplanted kidney will need to be renewed before the actual blood disorder like sparks it. But that's what I got. That's what I got diagnosed with. I've forgotten what the name is, but it's called secondary FST, I think. And secondary means that it's I think it's either diabetes, the blood disorder, and I think there's another one. And they found it was a blood disorder. Now, on the face of it, when I first got diagnosed, they were like, "Nah, don't worry about it. You're gonna die before this becomes an issue." And so, if I wasn't bodybuilding, Yeah. And 2009 was after I did these doses. You know, in 2006, I competed at 2005, I competed at the West and won my class for the first time. I went to the Britain, and my goal was not to come last. And I placed sixth. So I was like, as if I'd won the overall. I was over the moon. And then I promised my wife I wouldn't go back on cycle until she'd conceived our second child. And thinking, as we all did back then, a couple of weeks off, a couple of Novodex, I'll be good to go. So 11 months later, she conceived, and that's where I learned a lot about the fertility protocol. I now give, and a lot of people have used it. I learned a lot then, and weirdly enough, I went to the West Britain that year and won my class on the overall, and I was natural. Well, as natural as someone off for 11 months could be, but the fact is the degeneration of my kidney has been more about using diuretics, restricting water, because that's what we did back then. So those listening to this now going, no, you don't restrict water. I've done shows where I didn't drink anything for 48 hours, because the understanding and the knowledge that we all have now just wasn't about, so that didn't help. And then obviously going up to like weights like 117 kilos in the off season and stuff like that didn't do my blood pressure any good. And again, it was at a time where no one checked. It was just, as long as your face wasn't red, you were good to go, and I'll 911 just, and so that affected my kidneys far more than what we would call gear. So the lifestyle did, but from a very different way to what many would think it would. And even then, I was expecting like lecture after lecture whenever I was in the hospital. Obviously not when I was really down, but it wasn't mentioned at any time, not by anybody. So yeah, I can see the connection. And I, when I was on UK Muscle, I had people saying that and stuff like that. In fact, one guy actually said that I didn't have sepsis. I actually had a bad jab in my leg, and that's why I had to have the surgery. And all of that was because I got a bad jab.
Yeah, I mean, that would take some doing.
Yeah, exactly. And the ironic thing about that is I've never had a bad jab, ever.
Never.
So never ever have I had a bad jab. And so, I get that, Johnny, especially in the current climate,
It's big news now. It's big news.
Pardon?
All we see on Generation Iron is dead people. They fucking love it. Some guy, remember, bodybuilder died and he was actually just in the audience. He wasn't even doing the show. So someone died at the show and he wasn't even in the show. But like you had this blood condition, and it is worth pulling like a mention that like living as a bodybuilder and potentially having other things, what you're doing is going to exacerbate pre-existing health conditions. Like it is.
Yeah.
So we're not saying it's not, are we? We're just saying it's not the sole driver.
It wasn't the cause, but it definitely affected how quickly it came along. Without a shadow of a doubt. And like I said, the irony of it all is when I was trying for my second child in 2005, 2006, that's when I started to really bring down my doses. So when I competed in 2015, I was on less than 1200 when I competed. That run in for the competition, less than 1200, which wasn't heard of in the early 2000s, and so my dosage came right down. But yeah, and I totally hold my hand up to that, Dan. It had a contributory factor. I've got you know, without a shadow of a doubt. And what slightly annoys me is, yeah, bodybuilders are dying and the heart attacks and stuff like that. And I'm not saying it's got nothing to do with bodybuilding, because people always aim on the steroids, looking at that, but they've got to look at the vast amount of foods that some of these guys eat, the size of them, you know, and that does play a contributory factor. But people won't listen to that because all they're interested in
Paul,
is knocking it.
one thing I was actually going to ask you, which is actually related to this, how much do you think genetics plays on people's ability to tolerate higher dosages? For example, we've got some very high profile people, publicizing these large doses and having very little negative side effects. And those then, with genetics that are not predisposed to being able to tolerate those large doses are going and doing the same thing and fucking themselves up. Do you think that is a part of this whole thing? Because like I've always believed in it. I've always believed in those who've had the better, sort of genetics and stuff, that have had a better ability to manage those and have less negative side effects.
Do you know what? I totally agree. If anybody says genetics have got nothing to do with it at the upper echelon, right? You've got physiques that you can see that work ethic is the main driver. Yeah, you can just see it, and then you've got physiques where gear is the main driver. All right, the upper echelon guys, weirdly enough, probably don't take as much gear as everybody thinks they do when you look at their size. I'm sure we all know someone who is virtually, oh, you train, do you? And they take more than them. I certainly know lots and lots from UKM days, and, so genetics definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. But I will say, for everybody listening, don't believe everything everybody says, because like Dan said earlier, everybody does cardio no matter what they tell you. It seems to be a thing to eat carbs now, as in when you're on a diet, it's a bragging right that you're eating carbs. My coach is great because I'm eating carbs. You should be eating fucking carbs, but people brag about stuff or tell things that, everybody believes stuff on social media. But the problem is, some of the guys out there now, I know really well. Yeah. And I know what they were on, how long they were on, and even what they're on now. And you read their social media and they wasn't, and they didn't, and they're not, So I'm sure we all know that, person that'll go, no, I'm not on anything, and knowing that he's knocking loads in each week and whatever. No, I know I've been off for 12 months, so I would just be careful about the guys that are out there, and we all know who they are.
Yeah, and the cruise phase as well is something that's become interesting. I'm on a cruise. What does that mean? Well, it's just a different cycle where I use something less androgenic, like Primo, because that's fine. And then in between doing tren, I do Primo, so I'm not on cycle, so I'm natty.
Well, it's like everybody's suddenly a chemist. It's like, oh yeah, because the androgen receptors are down and I'm hitting it. Stop talking. If you want to stay on, then do yourself a favor, get a cycle that works for you, go on it for 8 to 12, 16 weeks, and then come right down to TRT doses of like 125 milligrams a week. Yeah, but that's what a cruise, that's what TRT is for. It's to make sure you don't dip under that I feel like killing myself line.
Yeah. We had Dr. Dean on as well, who basically just said, unless you're planning on coming off for like a year, there's fuck all point trying to get your natural testosterone for like 8. It's not going to happen in the time that you're going to have off. So there's actually fuck all benefits to going. But then the TRT dose is like, I do a mil. What's the dose of your mil? Like, I do a mil. What's a mil? Like, and then 125 becomes 250, becomes 300. Like, and then you're like way over and your lipids are fucked because you're not even giving yourself a fighting chance. You know, and then taking those blood results in TRT, because you said the genetic capability of people to actually like recruit this testosterone, you could do 125, and this isn't an example, I could do 250, and actually our blood work might match differently. It could be the other way around or whatever. But when I've seen blood work from people on similar doses, it is person dependent. You need to go and have those blood tests to make sure. And actually now with women now do TRT, and a lot of the time without actually doing any research into what their blood levels are and not checking that they're not putting themselves into super physiological, like, but apparently TRT is fine for women now because science.
They don't have sperm.
But without actually like checking. So for anyone who's thinking about running TRT, go and see what your TRT dose is actually doing.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I said to Johnny this earlier, and getting blood tests now. When I used to do it in the early 2000s stuff, I had to go to my doctors and con it, you know. But now it's everywhere. You know, you can do it over the internet, get it done, send it back, you know, and it's everywhere. So there's no excuse for it. But the problem is, I had a client that got bloods done, got the results, and then drew blood. I was like, well, that test is useless now, because your RBC and your hematocrit and stuff like that has all gone down because you've just given blood and whatever. So they're useless. You know, it's and like you said about TRT, that's why when the official one is done, you take a certain amount and you get seen every week, because you know they look at how it's affected you each week. What's the perfect sport, the you know, and things like that. Where TRT in our world is just well, I can't be bothered to do half a mil. I'd mill, and then I'll do it over like 2 weeks, and then you forget and do it the next week as well, and you know, and stuff like that. It's
then
just,
you put a gram of Primo in.
Because Primo's virtually a unicorn drug. You know, you could give that to a fairy. You know, it's fuck all. And when they actually get some real Primo,
which they don't,
you know,
ever,
which they don't, as we all know. But I think, but it's always going to be like this. Back in the forum days, people would follow what people like me did. You know, people like Jordan. You know, people will follow what guys with a physique do, without understanding that what you should do is look at what they did when they had a physique like yourself. Like they would, you know, people will look at, I don't know, Flex Lewis's diet or training plan and go, right, that's how I'm going to train. But really what you should do is dig out the archives of when he was 18, 19. What was he doing then?
Yeah.
Because that is more appropriate to you, you know. That doesn't mean you're going to get where he is, because that brings in the G word, you know, and never so more important than with Flex, you know. Jim's he's got a work ethic that's right up there, but he has genetics, especially under his fucking knee, you know. But yeah, I just, like you said, Dan, it just leads to it's just stay on cycle. Why are you lying to everybody? Just stay on cycle. If you want to stay on, oh yeah, but you can't. It's not the done thing. Then stop telling people. Then why are you making a big thing about it? Stop telling people.
Yeah.
You know, people ask me. Tell them to fuck off. You know?
I mean, there is just so much out there, and I think that the main thing is that people are reading the stuff. And Jordan Peters has had loads of stick recently about these things. Victor Black's had a meltdown, although I haven't seen any athletes from Victor Black that are massive. And then, but he wasn't saying you should do this. He was saying, I'm doing this as a kind of, for you to use him as like a kind of experiment, for you to view as a case study, like in your own brain with your own thoughts about it. It wasn't saying you should do this. That wasn't the thing, but it's been interpreted And a lot of people do that. And actually, we all did that with the Flex magazines. Come on. I looked at like Ronnie Coleman and I was like, well, I should do Ronnie Coleman's workout, right? Because I'm definitely like black and massive. Like that's, you know, I was like 11 stone wet. I was like, that's that's going to work for me, isn't it? But we all did it at the beginning.
And that's what I did in the early forum days. I was really open, like really open. And it got to the point where I stopped sharing what I was doing with insulin. Because people genuinely, what I found they were doing, they were using my acknowledgement of what they were doing. Well, yeah, that's okay. As it doesn't matter what other people say because P-Scarb said. And I'm sure they would do it with other people like that. But on UK Muscle, that seemed to be, I just realized that seemed to be some sort of stamp. So I stopped talking about insulin. If you jab too much test, you might get an abscess. If you jab too much growth, you've got no money. You know, you jab too much insulin, and I don't care. There seems to be this thing now where insulin's not dangerous anymore. You know, I actually on a group had a guy tell me that insulin lowers SHBG, and all the guys go to him because he's not a doctor, he's a PhD, and guys go to him for his out of box thinking, and he injects insulin to lower their SHBG so they can use more gear. I'm like,
well, that sentence doesn't make any sense because if you've lowered the SHBG, then you can use less steroids, isn't that?
Yeah. And I pointed it out because the reason why it came about was the Proviron link and with SHBG, which does work. And I was like, right, you need to stop writing on the internet. Stop speaking to people. Stop, you know.
You're banned from the internet.
You know, yeah. Just stop communicating with anybody. You know. But yeah, you know, and I think that's the problem we got now. I know Jordan took a bit of flack because he was saying how he's like scaling down and all that stuff to be healthy and things like that. And I saw some comments about, well, you can't tell us now, that's the thing, because you did all this, but now you're saying we shouldn't. And he explained himself, which I've got a lot of time for Jordan. I coached Jordan for his first British outing, and we're good friends, and he's a really good guy. He's not changed. He was always impatient and everything back then. But he answered it properly. It's like, yeah, but I do this so you learn from my mistakes. And that's why I'm honest with people now. You know, if I say, you know, I wouldn't bother doing that, that's not because I don't think you're ready for anything. It's because I did it and it gives you fuck all to what you're thinking it gives you. You know, there's lots and lots of drugs that were out that sort of had claims and things like that. There was one, I've forgotten what it's called now, something P2, and it just made you shit. Like you never had. And apparently it was really good for fat loss. Yeah, because you can't get to the kitchen when you're on the fucking toilet for 24 hours a day. You know, and it had all this big sort of, you know, American forum sort of excitement behind it, and it turned out to be bollocks, you know, but there will always be that stuff. Yeah. So but yeah.
So we've got a couple of questions on the post, so I think we'll get stuck into those. So GZ Bodybuilding asked some of your most memorable memories through bodybuilding, sessions with others, show day stuff, etc. So what's your biggest fondest memories?
Right. Okay. Probably my biggest memory training wise would have been in, I think it was 2008, and I was being coached by Harold Morelia, and I was down at his gym, Forest Gym in Crawley, and he and Alvin Small came. Alvin was coached by Harold. I'd met Alvin a couple of times.
He's not small, for anyone who's wondering.
No, I was just about to say, for anybody out there, his name is a lot like growth hormone. it means nothing to what he is or does, you know. And the older generation will get the link to growth hormone. But Alvin is a man mountain. And we trained, and I was like 5 weeks out from the show. I've never trained harder in my life. This guy, we were doing, the warm-up was like a session, you know. And we were doing arms and shoulders, and we did arms first. And you know, you do the old sort of bend over arm curl with your elbow against your knee sort of thing. Yeah. And then there's the version without the elbow against the knee. Well,
what do you call those? Because I use them and I put them in plans. I can never figure out what to call.
I could call them Arnie curls.
Yeah, like, or hanging.
Yeah, I was just about to say Arnold did them. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the video when he was coming, right? When he was like, coming in the pub.
Yeah. And you can swing it. So the way to cheat on that is you could swing it back and whatever. Yeah. I kid you not, Alvin, my biggest memory from that is he didn't swing. He didn't have a swing. It went straight down, straight and up with 50-kilo dumbbells.
What?
And I'm not joking. And it was like they were 20 kilos, you know, and he pushed me more in that session than I've ever trained before. It was just ridiculous. And that's the biggest memory I've got from that. Show day would have to be probably 2008. 2007, I messed up at the Britain. I woke up on my own in the Premier Inn at Southport very early. I remember Ian Chambers came in to my room around about 6:30 to have a look at me, and he's like, yeah, you look, yeah, brilliant. I've never seen you better. It was off the back of my second overall. You know, there was a lot of talk going into the Britain and things like that. And I was sat around on my own, fiddling my thumbs, going, right, if I take one more Dizide, I'll look better than I look now. And as you can probably understand, I took it, and then as the hours went on, I just looked shitter and shitter and shitter and shitter. And I didn't make the top six. It was only a year I didn't make the top six, that in 2015. So in 2008, I had a thing to show, I had a thing to prove, and it just couldn't have gone any better. The look I had on stage, I got third. I was 1 point behind second. It was a really tough lineup that year. And I look at the pictures and I remember just the whole occasion being just amazing. Do you know what I mean? It was just awesome. You know, and even now I look back at pictures, I was bigger in 2012 and I had a more successful year in a way because I did the Worlds and the Universe and all that stuff. But 2008, I placed third, and the look I had, I was just like, yeah, that was, you know, it still is probably. And I really like the look I had in 2012 because I was a lot thicker and a lot grainier and stuff. But the look I had in 2008, I was just like, yeah, that, you know, so that was probably the best. And the training with Alvin Small, but I have so many of them, you know, over the length I've been doing this. One thing is, I would say hold on to those memories, you know, because we will all go through the point where we stop. Yeah, we will all go through the point where we stop competing, where we stop training at that level, you know, and I would just say enjoy it. I had a lot of great memories. The Universe in 2012, backstage with the other British guys, Ricky Moore, Tommy Staunton, you know, we had a real camaraderie at the Universe. And I came 8th that year, so I didn't make the top 6, but it was a fantastic lineup. It was a fantastic sort of atmosphere and vibe backstage, because normally at like area shows in the Britain, you know, you'll say hi to people, you know, but at the end of the day, you're out there and you know, it's for you. Where at the Worlds and the Universe, it's, you know, you're representing your country, you know, and you know, I didn't really see Ricky as a you know, as a competitor. He was just Ricky from England, and we were, you know, Mind you, he spanked me at the British that year and the World, so I didn't see him as a threat at all. But you know, it was just that atmosphere, and I look back and I think, do you know what? That's the memory. That's the overall memory I'll take from my bodybuilding time is the people I met and the vibe and the atmosphere. I said this to Pete Lawson on Instagram the other week. You know, that time of year, you know, 2005, 2008, you know, body power was good. You know, there was lots of things that were really good about being in the game, and I remember that as a whole. To be fair, and the people I met that I still are friends with, and you know, still speak with, and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing I'll take from that.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome, to be fair. Right, so I am gonna leave you guys with this question for a second while I pop to the toilet because the water is high. I am gonna piss my pants. So this one is it easier now to get a pro card in the UK than it was before? And if so, is that a positive thing or a negative thing? I got a funny feeling this one won't take long to discuss. So
I mean, the first bit doesn't need an answer.
No,
it's
the
1
thing
versus like 10 or whatever. Like,
yeah.
that's
Is it easier to get a pro card? Yes and no. Is there more opportunities? Yes, definitely. Like you said, back before Two Bros and stuff like that, there was one pro card, and let's face it, unless you were really special, it would go to the heavyweights or the supers. So there's more opportunities. I don't think it's easy to get a pro card.
oh, it's not easy.
Yeah,
but do you think the standard is high enough to warrant more?
I don't like the I think they were, I don't know if they do them now because I don't really follow Two Bros that much, but I believe at some shows they were like pro cards for the top 3 or something like that. I'm totally against that. I don't think you should. Pro cards should go to the overall in the overall that you're in. So now I understand. Obviously, there's an overall bikini, an overall classic or physique, and overall bodybuilding. The winner of those at that show, so the show's up here, and then the winner of the overall of all the classes is up here. So I think that person should get a pro card.
Yeah,
but I don't think second place and third place should. No. Just like, unless it's really close, if you get third place at a qualifier, I don't think you should go to Britain. You know, so yeah, the opportunity is more. I don't think it's easier. I think to some degrees it's harder. I think I will say when Two Bros took over UKBFF split and all that sort of stuff, I do think some current pros, and I won't name names because, to be honest, I don't want to, but there are some current pros that went out of their way to fucking some outer Hebridy fucking show that was badly competed at and got a pro card. All right. And they'll never do anything with it. You know, I do believe that. But fair play to them. You know, if I competed at a show and I won and I got a pro card, I'm not going to go, do you know what? I don't want that. And the reason B is the standard's not as good as I wanted it to be. You know, you're going to take it, you know, because it's the end goal, isn't it?
Well, it used to be in the UKBFF, and I've said this before, is that you had to actually write a proposal. So you had to actually tell them that you were going to use it. Otherwise, they just wouldn't fucking give it. Even if you won the overall. At the UKBFF, I remember Wendy told me she had to write like a statement saying how she was actually going to utilize the pro card to actually even get it. You know, and a lot of people are going to get the pro card as a business venture. You know, and it's in the bio, right? So they must be cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's a lot of good pros coming through now.
There is.
You know, and I think there's a lot that can do some damage, and they've shown that they can do some damage in the bigger shows. But I also think that I guess not too many. Like I was saying before you came back, John, there's just more opportunity. I don't think it's easier. But
Well, there's a
more
lot of
opportunity.
really good pros in the UK right now, and that's amazing.
Yeah,
Love it. And
Yeah,
I think there's
without a
probably
doubt.
more than ever, which is wonderful. However it happened, brilliant. Maybe it was the card that then spurred them to actually do what they're doing, and now they're fucking smashing it. Wicked.
yeah,
But in the UK BFF days, you had 1 year, and you might just get edged out 3 years, and your career of that 3 year span where you could have then got is done. Like it's over.
You mean like Dean Lizak?
Yeah, like Dean should have been a pro. Like he was just. Yeah, exactly. A great example of someone who eventually just got pissed off. It was like he was second like so many times, and just I feel for those people that had that experience, who now would have been able to get the injection and the backing and maybe a financial backing to actually reach their full potential in the pro league.
yeah. I agree. I think everybody has a time, where they're on top of the game, or they're doing things right and stuff like that. And when the opportunity then isn't there for more than one card, then people who could have made Dean's, like you said, Dean's a really perfect example, because for him to step away and then concentrate on one show, a pro show, whatever, he would have developed into a real challenge. So yeah, I feel for people like Dean that just didn't. Who was the guy that always came second, and then in the end he wrote to them and they gave him a pro card? I think it was.
Oh fuck! I remember that.
We're talking, early 2000s.
Yeah, I remember
he
that.
Always came second. He came second to Paul George. Paul George, because he was a heavyweight. It was before super heavyweights. He was a heavyweight, and Paul George was a middleweight, and Paul beat him. Forgotten his name,
Fuck, that's gonna bug me.
Jammer.
Was it?
Yeah, I'm sure it was Jammer. Forgotten his full name, and very slicked back guy.
We'll put it in the comments when we remember.
Yeah, and I think he basically wrote to the UK BFF and then wrote to is it NPC or whatever, the main people, and he was given a pro card on his consistency to get second. So I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, so we're a little bit like if you consistently get second or third at the qualifiers, you rack up points, don't you, for the Olympia?
Yeah.
And then if you're top there, yeah. So a little bit like that, but before that was thought of. So, but yeah. So, what was the second part of that question?
I think it was just whether or not it was a good thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is kind of like covered, really, isn't it? Because
I was going to say what you said there, Dan, explains that. It wasn't. I think when Two Bros took it all over, they went totally to the other end of that by giving like previous winners of classes at the Britain all pro cards. I think they took the piss out of it then, but in its current state. So yeah,
and it is kind of settled. Like, so actually, like, yeah, there's some wasted pro cards, but I think actually, like, it has created a drive of like more people finding that, getting security with sponsorship, being able to do it. And I think we've got the UK's got a real strong like team of people heading to the Olympia, like probably stronger than it has done for as long as I can remember. So the outcome's been wonderful. Whether or not it actually was helped by it, fuck knows. But
yeah,
definitely.
So another question. Okay, so what's your view on today's bodybuilding versus back in the versus the 90s and early 2000s? Well, what's better versus what's worse? So it's a very I think that was Rob Cannon. So Rob knew exactly. He knew exactly what he was doing with that question.
I think to sum that up, I think the biggest difference is patience. I think back in the early 2000s and the 90s and stuff, you trained for the show in front of you, and then you built off that. I've had some clients come to me and they're like, and we're talking goals and stuff, and they've done a few shows and they want to be at the British, or even they've not done a show and they want to be at the British.
Hashtag
I think-
road to pro.
Yeah, and I think it's that. I think the time served, you know, and I don't mean that from a judging point of view, as in it's your turn, but more of a people are going to the British with an incomplete physique, you know, and the reason that I go in there is because every federation bar none are, like we said, are inviting 10 people from a class or 5 people from a class. And so you're like, for me, when it took me 14 years to get to the Britain. From my very first show, it took me 14 years. You say that now, and they're like, fucking hell, you must have been shit. You know, and obviously I was, but it you know.
That's not how I remember it when I was a kid.
But, you know, it was sort of like they invited the guy who won. That was it. You know, maybe the guy who came second if it was close, but essentially the guy who won or the guy who came second.
Yeah.
So if you were getting thirds and fourths, you weren't going.
Yeah.
You know, and for a long period of time, I was getting thirds and fourths in
And you had one show option, right? You had your all regional show.
Yeah.
So you couldn't go and
and
fuck off and do another one. Like, you had one shot, and then your season was done. It was over.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the biggest difference is patience. I think there's more and more bodybuilders now that they sort of like the sound that they've been to the Britain, if that makes sense. You know, I've made the Britain. Yeah, you came last, but I made the Britain. And I'm like, you know, but I think it's that, and I think one of the worst things now is now this is a real bugbear for me, is people doing exercises that they see on Instagram. So I mentioned it on my podcast the other day. You've got people without a back doing isolated, one-armed, like pull downs, really slow to isolate the lats. But their hand position is that. So it's not actually focusing on the lats, you know, when we all know it should be that. But they think we're talking about Jordan again, but Jordan's a good example of this. That's what Jordan does because he's developed one of the best backs in the UK, if not globally. You know, he's got an amazingly thick back that he's built with deadlifts and bent over rows and one arm rows and all that lot. And now he will do focused lat things with that. And I'm like, brilliant, you deserve it. You got a fucking back, you know, a god's back. It's brilliant. And then you've got a guy who's 160 pounds soaking fucking wet, you know, not doing deadlifts and not doing bent over rows or anything like that. And then sort of stepping away from the machine going,
It's
and
not
like,
the starting point catalyst for growth. It's cool. It's a finisher. Everyone's like concentrating. I'm not feeling it and stuff. Like, you can feel some movements, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do them. Who really feels a squat? Not really. They really feel a squat.
I never really felt a bent over row.
No.
Until the next day.
No, my back's all right, and I built that motherfucker on deadlifts and rows, and I didn't feel any of them.
No, and I think that's it. I think there's too much. You know, I don't know about you two guys, but I've always gone into the gym with a hoodie or a sweatshirt on, and I've got a t-shirt underneath, and then when I was competing, I'd probably have a vest underneath that. And
3 layers of naked.
Yeah, and I would. There were some times, especially when I was in competing mode, I wouldn't take the hoodie or the sweater off, no matter how fucking hot it was. You know. And then there's times where I'd strip down to a t-shirt, and then, like I said, if I was in the last 4 weeks of a show diet, I would probably do my last exercise with a vest on. That's just me.
Yeah.
But now these guys, you know, they come into the gym in a vest, and I'm like, it's an air-conditioned gym. How the fuck are you getting warm?
Mm.
How are you, I just think it's...
Well, the thing with the ISO stuff is that gets me is that is an advanced move for someone who's incredibly developed, and working on feel only works if you have a muscle that you can feel. And so that's I actually did a little dig post on it as well. Using advanced training, if that's your like meat and potatoes exercise, is single arm D handle on a thing. I see millions. That's all I see in the gym. Like, I promise you that right now, that's not the reason you're growing. If you're doing other stuff around it, that's probably, maybe it's a nice finisher. I don't know. I'm a hit trainer, so I cut out nice finishers. But like, it's an advanced thing, and actually neurological connections with your muscles take time anyway. And the biggest way to make that happen is to grow a big old fucking muscle. So if you're just starting out, it's just, you're not going to fucking feel it. And it doesn't matter how slow you contract your little tendon that will be your lat in 5 years. It's not going to fucking help you out. Shoot me.
I think also the difference is, the internet, social media gets a bad name a lot. But I think it's a two-edged sword. You see, nowadays, you don't have to rely on the biggest guy in the gym.
Yeah.
So when I started, probably the same with yourselves, but definitely when I started, I started lifting in, 86, 87 in a gym in Huddersfield called Maximums. And I don't know if you remember him, Billy Payne.
Yeah, I remember Billy.
Yeah.
I actually trained with him a few years ago. He's still completely insane.
Billy trained there with a gang of guys like him, old school, working class, big, squats, deadlifts, all that sort of stuff. And my best mate at the time lived with him, So I saw Billy outside the gym. And one of the reasons I started competing is I went to his place once, and I've told Billy this, he was sat on the sofa with what I can only describe as a cauldron of oats, egg whites, raisins, peanut, just doing that. And I remember pointing to something across the room, and he went like this, and he had a rag top on, and his tricep was like down here, and that was one of the reasons why I started competing. I know Billy quite well now, and I've told him that story a couple of times. And I've said the reason I started competing was, training and taking it seriously was, that time. I don't know. I get, like you said, it's, you build it through basic movements, and then,
I'm not saying there's not a place for it, but the chances
without a doubt,
if that's the main part of your training, and I'm seeing people doing these things really slow, they're leaving the gym, they're not even sweating. There's like nothing's happened. Like, I just don't think that's the catalyst for an adaptation physically that your body actually doesn't really want to do, because it's a survival technique. It's shit. Your body does not want to grow. You have to give it a good reason to grow. And I'm sorry, but like doing a D handle, like pull down for 17 seconds as your primary builder probably isn't going to do it. I'm not saying it definitely won't. Maybe your genetic mix-up. Maybe it has. But I don't think that's the main catalyst for your growth that's happening.
Yeah, and I think the overcomplication of things as well is very different. The reps in reserve.
No, fuck that. Fuck that.
I was just about to say I was hoping he was on the same wavelength.
Yeah, fuck.
But I don't see the value. It's like when I start working with people and we talk about training, I'm like, right, and they're like, right, okay, so I would lower the rates and do more reps, and I would do this, and I was like, right, okay, this is my philosophy of training. All right, no matter your goal, lift the heaviest weight you can for the rep range that you're given. Yep. All right. No one, if anybody tells you how to build muscle is 8 to 10 reps, tell them to fuck off. The evidence is there, proper evidence from proper people like Brad Schonfield who do proper studies with human beings, you know, that a multitude of rep ranges is how you build a good physique. You know, yes, you know, when I take a client on, the first thing I do is give them rep ranges of 15 reps. They're like, really, I found that a bit difficult. Like, lower the weight. Well, but it's really hard. Yeah, it is. Fancy that, you know. And the only reason I do that is because you can be damn certain they've never trained like that before. So what's the point in going to a coach and the coach gives you exactly what you've been doing?
Mm.
You know. So it really does make people think, you know, fucking hell, right, okay. But always lift as heavy as you possibly can for the reps given. Reps in reserve. If you're able to count your own reps and think, I've got 3 more reps in me, I'll have to stop after this one. You're not fucking training. You know, you're really not.
And also, how do you know? How do you know where your reps in reserve if you're not training to failure anyway? Because it's adaptive, so you don't know. So no one knows.
Exactly.
So they're going, "Oh, it's hard," and put it down. Oh, I'm massive now.
Lyle McDonald got into a really big argument with, I've forgotten who else, but he got into a really big argument, and that was his argument, that how do you know that you've got reps in reserve if you haven't gone to complete failure on every exercise? And they were arguing that, no, you should know. And Lyle's other way was, when you start to slow down your rep movement, that's when you know you're getting to the end. Because, and you think about that, no one has put 100 kilos on a bench press and done 30 reps at the same pace.
Yeah. No,
at some point.
The funny thing, Paul, right, is some people I come across in the gym have been training for years and they still mix up the lactic acid feeling in their muscle for failure.
Yeah. Failure is momentary muscular failure. So failure is deemed as you cannot complete a full rep.
Yeah, and that's concentric failure.
Tempo, yeah, with the same tempo as you've been doing. We can all finish a rep by bending and fucking swinging and whatever. But if you're doing an arm curl at the same way you did rep 1, you know, if you can't do it for 10 and you're only doing a quarter away and whatever, that's momentary muscular failure, you know. And people think, oh, it's when I can't move. That benefits no one. And it's shown that those reps that are slowing down, the reason why they're slowing down is because the body, the brain, is recruiting more and more muscle fibers to actually do the lift. So you actually make the best gains with those slow reps because your body's recruiting more because it can't lift the weight. So it's recruiting more and more and more so they get to the end. So it's, do you have to go until you cannot fucking move or breathe on a set? No. If you do that, your CNS, you know, would just fucking implode.
I love it. It's my favorite.
Well,
but that's why my volume's nothing.
Well, but in essence, that's what you're doing. It doesn't matter where you set the bar, you know, as long as you're lifting. Because people obviously then go, oh right, I'll put 500 pounds on it and I'll not be able to do one, and that's just you being a dick, you know. But it's like my muscular failure is a lot less nowadays, you know. But it's still, you know, I did leg press the other day, and thankfully, although half my left leg is still on the operation table, legs is one of the only body parts I can still lift a decent weight. So the other night I did 6 sets of 10, building up to 370. Now, on that last set, the first maybe 3 or 4, were not easy, but were moving fine. And then the next 5 or 6 were just, they were crushing. But I did all the reps. So you would say I didn't reach failure. But I was so slow in getting that number 10 up, it was, it was like catching public transport. It was just ridiculous. So, but and that does annoy me. I guess like both of you, I think people trying to overcomplicate things to make it stand out. It's just like nutrition. Someone will create something and it'll stand out from the norm and they'll put a story to it and that's the new thing.
Yeah.
When in
fact, and a fancy name.
Well, the outcome is the same. It's catered for, but there's a new superfood that does the same thing, that does something.
Exactly.
I have these conversations like quite often with the rep range thing. It was funny. I can't remember the name of the doctor, but he's quoted all over. But he was just saying that it's actually the 5 reps from failure that matter within any chosen like rep range. Okay, you have obviously like other chemical things that happen as well, but the stimulus for hypertrophy is the 5 last reps, as like you say, because then you're recruiting more, and then you get the actual failure.
And I think it's to do with the movement slowing down as well, because it generally happens in those last 5.
Yeah.
But it's definitely the latter end of your rep range. And that's how you know, because what else I say to people is, right, I give them a range. Always give people a range because you're not going to nail it with 10 reps all the time. So if I'll go, right, do 10 to 12 or 12 to 15. If you're using 10 to 12 and you get less than 8, you're lifting too heavy. If you get to 12 and you think, oh, I've got to 12, I've got to stop, that's too light. Essentially, 11 is the optimum. But, and that's what people do. They'll go, I'll do this way. And they'll bang out 12 and go, right, okay, 12, I'll stop. When what they really should do is put more weight on for the next set.
Yeah.
And fail. And even if they fail at 9 on the next set, then at least they know that 9 is doing more than that 12.
The methodology of basically training to failure, that is the essence of building muscle, because it's an adaptation. If you go and do your rep range and that was 12, but you could have done 13. When I get people when they're just starting out, I'm like, hey, like if you're in the set and you realize when you're in and you're in too deep and you can do 2 more, just do fucking 3 more. And then write it down or remember it. I remember stuff. It's weird. It's old school, I know. But then next time, make sure you don't make that mistake again. The guy who I was quoting actually was Chris Beardsley. I don't know whether you're into him.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And he was just talking about the rep range, and actually, the Mountain Dog was talking about rep ranges, and actually the rep range, like, can you grow from high reps? Yeah, sure, as long as your cardiovascular doesn't fail before, like, true muscular failure.
That was the argument that Lyle put as well, that you can gain from 30 reps. I think Brad Schoenfield has done recent studies to actually show that you can grow with rep ranges of up to 30 as long as your RM isn't less than 30% of your 1 RM.
Yeah, I think it's mental capacity as well. A surefire way of hitting failure is lower reps with heavier weights. And then trusting someone that you're coaching to hit failure with high reps is basically trusting their mental psyche to be able to push you to that point.
Yeah, because it does.
Yeah, because let's face let's face it. Doing low reps and heavy weights not easy and it's not pleasant, but it seems to have less of an impact than doing a heavy weight that you can cope with for 20 reps. Or 25 reps.
Yeah, the exposure, and like you said, the dig into the central nervous system.
Well, yeah, and it makes you real. And I think one of the lost arts is intensity. Lewis Breed. You know Lewis from
Yeah.
down here.
He was on here a few weeks ago.
All right, okay. There's one thing I've known Lewis since before his junior days, and the one thing that I've always admired about him is his work ethic. You know, and I think that's one of we was talking about genetics and drugs and all that sort of stuff, but I genuinely believe the work ethic of an individual is one of the reasons why people are more successful than others, and obviously their success then is capped by their genetics. I think overall genetics is the cap, but their work ethic. I know some guys with shit physiques who had a great work ethic that built something decent, you know, to take him a certain way, you know. And then I know guys who are gifted that had shit work ethics and they got a certain way, but they just didn't get as far, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, do you know what? I think that's sad. You know, I think that's it's fucking lazy.
It's frustrating
it's
for that.
No, but a gift is rarely appreciated. Do you know what I mean? You go to work and you earn your money and you buy a car or some trainers. Like, it's worth more, isn't it, than if someone were to give that to you? You'd appreciate it more because you went and worked for it. Like, and I think that carries the longevity of that carries further. And you get to enjoy the process of actually like achieving the goal rather than it being just presented to you. Like I can see why they duck out, because the challenge isn't there, and the challenge is the fun bit of bodybuilding, surely.
Oh, without a doubt.
Gentlemen, my challenge right now is staying awake.
Hey, you've got like one more day.
I know. One more day. So what I want to do is rather than 5 top
tips.
So basically, Paul,
at
the top of at the end of our podcast, we ask each of our guests. It doesn't have to necessarily be bodybuilding related, but just 5 tips for our viewers, for off the top of your head.
Yeah, they don't have to be good. Okay. Often they're not.
Right. Okay. It doesn't have to be in order, does it? Just random 5. Yeah. Always be true to yourself. No matter what you do. All right. Be true to yourself and you'll never fail. All right. You don't live other people's lives, you know. Go into the gym with a plan. I didn't do that in my earlier years and I regret, because I wasted a lot of years. Go into the gym with a plan. 3 would be understand nutrition better. And I can confidently say that the majority of people don't. I'm not on about the intricacies of macro and micro nutrients and stuff like that, but look into nutrition better for yourself. Don't just eat chicken. Don't just do this. Look at, the slight nuances for like, how's that meal make you feel, and things like that. So getting to know nutrition in yourself. When I did that, it really made a difference. Same for training. So get to know what works for you, not what other people do. We've given a prime example with the old isolation stuff. Get to know what works for you. Squatting never worked for me. Yet I built a good pair of legs on leg press, So get to know what works for you. And I guess finally is don't go through the mental challenges on your own. Be that bodybuilding, be that competitive, or be that real life. If there's one thing I would say to people now after the last 5 years, is that my progress in making my life better for myself is because I'm not shy to share things. I don't feel like it's a weakness. So those 5 really. I don't know if that would help anybody.
They were very good.
So
definitely a better quality than we normally used to.
Yeah. These are going to be on a highlight reel at some point.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well,
So
great,
those
mate.
were good.
It was wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for coming and sharing
Great to
your
be here.
journey, and and yeah, just giving a little bit of spice, little blast from the past. I remember my first show getting absolutely annihilated, and you were up there doing bits, and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna do some of that shit. And yeah, so it was good to see, and it was good to see you the other week as well.
Yes, it was good to see you at the show. I must admit, I was at the PCA show going, I only know the officials. And I was looking around and I was like, I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
and then your ugly mug appeared. So
there you go.
I was all sorted. Then.
Almost as old,
Yeah.
but just
Almost,
as ugly.
mate. God. It's been a real pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Wicked.
I really appreciate it.
Cool, man. Good to see you. And peace out, Johnny. One more day of low carbs and then whoop, whoop, whoop. Till then, go and die in a bush.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
All right. Big love, guys.
Bye.